Got all my ingredients now for the next bit I want to do, which is making these splash guards. Been waiting for the rubber to turn up, and that's now here. Been through the fixings, and I think I've got everything I need to put these together. They're very simple, so they shouldn't take very long at all. For material, I'm going to use the lining from the spare boot. This is just aluminium. It's not very thick, but it'll be perfectly fine for this job. And I've got one of the original splash guards which is in reasonable shape. And this was very repairable. I could have done that, but I think it'd be better just to make these in some aluminium. So that's my template, marker pen obviously, and the roll of rubber sheeting, and then all of these fixings here are just what I had that matches. They're almost all the same, because you have to screw this into the inner arch to actually get it into the car. Let's see how we go. Oh, and there's one more thing. Where did I put it? The other piece is this, which is the bracket which I think holds it to the end of the wing. You can see there used to be a bolt or a screw or something there. And that goes on there like that, and I'm considering just making this panel in one piece with a little tab sticking off the bottom, because I think that might be best, or I might rivet an extra strip on, so if it breaks you can always replace it easier. I can actually make use of the curve that's already in this aluminium. It's very, very close to this, so it gives me a little bit less work to do, which is nice. Make a rough guess at this end where it's missing. And the tab would be there. Get a different pen for that. That isn't a bolt hole, that's a rust hole. We don't mark that one. Oops. So those are the wrong ones. Right, and that's the shape we want. And I was just going to mirror it, but I've just realised that if I mirror that, that's going to be a little bit harder for me to draw. So I will probably make a paper template of this to go on this side, just to make things a bit easier here. Not to worry, that's easy enough. Actually, what am I thinking? This is really soft. Bend it the other way. Easy. This side does differ slightly because there's a cutout for the fuel filler neck from the petrol tank. Some reference points left, but not many. There we go. I might actually salvage these steel brackets off. I can isolate it with some rubber sheet. And they're still in good shape, so they're still reusable. Seems silly to waste them. I tell a lie, this one's actually quite rusty and soft there, so let's cut a couple of these out in aluminium. I can always rivet them over what's on the rest of the material, and that means I don't have to put this tab on the end. That makes my cutting a little bit easier. A fairly flat bit, there we go. If I rivet these on, it means I can replace them in the future if I need to. Before I cut these out, I've got to drill the holes for the rivets, and I'm going to use 2 through the big part here, and once I've got those done I can then line that up with this panel and rivet them on before I cut this panel out. This is all just to make things easier to handle as I go. Sometimes you can get away with doing it this way, and sometimes you have to take all the pieces apart and do it on the bench, but the floor is my bench, so this is how I'm doing it. And these are just ordinary pot rivets, and they're also aluminium, so I shouldn't have the dissimilar metal issues that I might have if I did these in steel and riveted on with rivets like this. To make my life a little easier and to prevent accidentally chopping through the brackets, I've chopped the bottom off on both pieces here. It will make drilling a little bit more awkward because it's going to be a bit wobbly, but it does mean that I shouldn't damage the little strengthening brackets that we're going to put on. Also, I made these tabs very long. I made these tabs very long on the bottom here because I might be folding those back for extra strength. Then I can drill through both when I put the fixings on to hold it to the wing. Also means if I need to adjust the length for the wings, I've got that ability there now to save me any grief later. Hopefully you've got the right size thing on it. That's a bit weird. It squashed it down, but it's not snapped the thing off. I don't know why that is. got that out eventually. The stick had got stuck inside here somehow. Not had that happen before. Let's try again. There we go, that's what it should do. And this top one's secure, it's just doesn't look quite as good. Here it is, mocked up in place, and there's only 2 of the original bolt holes left. All the other holes have got to be re-drilled because that's all metal I had to replace on this car. You can see the notch here. I've got to just turn these edges so it clears fully, but that actually clears the filler neck. And on the original, this was folded back to about where the line is, and then a rubber sheet goes in on here. So I left it just a little bit big, and then I can tip this edge with some pliers and a hammer and just dolly that back. The riveted bracket is on the back, which means it shouldn't catch as much dirt and moisture, so should survive a bit longer. I am going to put some seam sealer around this when I've deburred all the edges, just to make sure it stays as weatherproof as I can manage. It's not going to disintegrate as quickly as a steel one would, it being aluminium, but I do have to be aware it's got to be isolated from this metal, which is steel. Steel and aluminium get along a little bit too well. On this side, I've also only got a couple of bolt holes left, so I will have to re-drill the rest. Not too bad though, because it does mean I can just drill straight through with the mudguard and it will definitely fit there. So it actually sort of helps me out a little bit. If you're wondering as well why I'm not using the tin snips, which do go through this aluminium very easily, it's because I can't get as straight a line with these as I can with the angle grinder. So this is really good for doing things like cutting the corners there, for helping bend that back, but for cutting like a big long straight line like this, I just can't do it with the hand snips. I wish I had one of those big, you know, table cutter things, but I don't, so we just do it this way. Time to fit these. I've got all the edges deburred nicely, and I just need to tip this edge that goes around the filler pipe neck, just using some channel lock pliers here, and I use the marker pen line as a guide, and you just start to bend it up a little bit at a time and work your way across from one end to the other. Don't try and do the full bend all at once. If you do it a little bit at a time, you get a much straighter edge when you're done. There are lots of ways to do this, and doing aluminium is a lot easier than steel. So I'm just going to do it this way. What I need to do is find out how to put this in the vise, and I think putting the narrow edge in is going to be the easiest way to do this. Oh no! I've fallen at the first hurdle. I can't tighten the vise up because the panel is in the way. Never mind, I can still do some of it. When you're actually making panels like this, you don't need special tools. There's no actual perfect tool for the job. You can use just what's lying around. Like this block of wood that used to be a shelf, for example. Might be a little bit soft though because it is pine, but we'll see. Oh, no, that works. That'll do well enough for what we're doing here. The whole idea with this basically is so you haven't got this edge of the metal against the rubber gasket, so it just keeps everything out of the way of cutting the rubber. So as long as it's got a soft edge here, which it has, and it's a nice crisp fold, it does the trick. If this was exterior bodywork, of course, you would spend more time on it than that, but for a splash guard inside a wheel arch, perfectly fine. Here's one I prepared earlier. Let's show you how we got this in. Now, originally there were screws that came through here with a bolt on the inside, just like this, but shorter, so I'll have to cut these down a little bit once everything's in. And to access it from the other side, you have to peel back the interior trim to get in here, which it's not ideal, but that's how it is. And as you go further down, it gets more and more difficult because I've put the boot floor in. So this is a job that where if you can, do it before the boot floor goes in, or take the boot floor out. It'll make things a lot easier. You would see what you're doing. It's okay though, we can do it with the boot floor in. And what I'm doing is these top two I already had holes for, so I used those, get the guard in place, and then everywhere that there's a hole drilled here, I have to go through and drill the bodywork I've just repaired and clamp it down. And we go one bolt at a time until we get to the last one. Don't be tempted to do all of your holes all at once and then try and fit it, because what will happen is this panel will conform to the inner arch over here, and then it'll shift where these bolt holes are ever so slightly, and you'll have a devil of a job lining things up. So if you can, doing it this way does make things a little bit easier for you. Drilling freshly done bodywork isn't my favourite thing in the world, but needs must. This one I've just drilled is down there, so I have to feed the bolt in through from this side and hold it while we tighten it up on the other side. But because you've drilled straight through, your holes line up perfectly. So there's no guessing involved. And just figure out which tools fit best for the job. Not that one. Helps when your tools stay on the thing you want them to be on. Right, there we are. that's handy. This one, you can get through the filler neck hole because we don't have the tank installed. And because that's pulled this in up here, it changes where this one sits at the bottom. Now, one thing I'm not sure of on here is this is very, very flat here, and you can see that the inner arch bulges out, so I might need to do a little bit of panel beating on this to get it to clear when the tank goes back in. The splash guard that was in here was very badly bent up and rusty, so I'm not 100% sure what shape it should really be. Last one. And this one is actually, boot floor's about here, and this last one is below the line of the boot floor, so it's where the return is outside the car. Let's see if I'm going the right way. There we go. You could call the job good at that, but I don't want to. A couple of reasons. One, these are very long, so these definitely need chopping down. Unfortunately, they're the only ones I had that were the right size. And this is aluminium against steel, so I want a barrier between the two to stop this sort of business over here. Anywhere you can reduce dissimilar corrosion is a good idea to do so. I've also got some strip to go on here. I bought this U-channel stuff for another project and it was too small, but it's just about perfect for this, and that should hopefully stop this from chafing against the wing. What I don't know is whether or not this is going to become a moisture trap, so I'm going to fit it and see how we go when everything's together. It's not like we're going to be driving the car through the winter, so I don't think it's going to be a big issue, but it's nice to have a use for this stuff. I did buy it as a wheel arch thing and it just wasn't the right size, but it will work good here. In a stroke of luck, or genius, you decide, the length of this rubber sheet that I've bought happens to be exactly the length I need, and I only need to cut some very simple shapes here. So I just need to roughly lay out a panel. I've got some metallic marker pens. These are great because you can mark black things like this so I can punch the holes through, because I want to use the bolts in the wing to hold this in place rather than gluing it or anything like that, so it's just a little bit easier to install. The thing I just need to do is give myself a guideline to cut along. Great, you don't have to be super accurate with this sort of thing, just as long as it's near enough. There we go, one rubber seal. I shall now punch these. The passenger side is a little bit more complicated because I'm wanting to do the flap that goes around the filler neck in one piece with everything else. So I've sort of done a bit of 3D thinking here to figure out which way around I need to go. I can just sketch around this piece here so I know roughly where that goes. There's already one hole to hold the top, but the bottom hole's gone because I had to repair that, so I'll have to put that in later. And I've sort of got to mark this and cut this, put it on the car, work out where everything goes, mark and punch, and so on and so forth until everything's done. So I'm going to fiddle about with this and hopefully we'll get it right. Really, it's nice to have any of the material left because this is all that's left of the seal around the filler neck, and yeah, it's not a lot to work with, but it's better than nothing. Damage my shears, so clear all that off. I'll cut this hole once everything's on, because then at least it'll be in the right place in theory. And I'm cutting this quite a bit oversized, just in case. For putting the holes in, I've learned that some doubled over corrugated cardboard on a piece of wood is the best thing, at least with what I've got available, to prevent the punches from being damaged when you hit them. I've picked out the one that's the nearest fit to the bolts I have, and I'm using a good heavy lump hammer so I can make a nice clean cut. He says, and doesn't hit it hard enough. There we go. Always worried I'm going to bash my hand. So quite often I don't hit it hard enough. Ow. There we go, and I did manage to hit my hand, because I always do. Now offer this up to the car just to check fit. My 3D thinking was close. The holes all line up where they should, but when I fold this over, it's leaving a gap here. I could cut the whole piece again, or the easier option is just to move these holes across a little bit. I've got enough material here to do it, and that will take up this slack here. Oh well, mistakes happen. All the holes moved across a little bit, and it's not really an issue for what we're doing. Remember, this is a barrier, it's not a seal, so these extra holes aren't a concern for me. The important bit is I cut a slot in here, and now that folds back and goes over the original hole up here, goes over the entire fuel flap area, and I can drill another hole down here. The only thing I'm not sure of is if it's enough. I feel like the gap here is very, very small, but it's certainly no worse than it was before, so it's probably okay. I had plenty of material, so I decided to make a new one. Sometimes trial and error means you don't get it right first time. Yeah, I probably should have used a template of some description. Never mind. Now, that covers loads of area. I'm much, much happier with that. I don't like the holes being too close to the edge on rubber because they have a habit of tearing out towards the edges. So this means there's a lot more material to go through. and I can clamp this down, and then we can cut the hole in here when the fuel tank goes in. I'll decide where to cut that hole only when we put the tank in. That way I'm not going to guess and get it wrong, and we should be good. I need to trim the excess off because there's far too much material here at the moment. But before I do that, I want to get this fixed to the car so I can make sure everything is where it needs to be. I'm a lot happier with that. Covers the hole properly, and you can see it's nice and neat. So now we can get the splash guards on properly, because the other side is also done. Everything is in as it should be, and that should just prevent the steel and the aluminium from touching each other and causing problems down the line. And we'll see how it goes. I mean, you never know with these things until you try them. Hopefully it's not going to give us any extra problems, and hopefully it will cure a problem we do have. Oh, fiddly. Fiddly, fiddly. Start from the top. Well, I have no idea why this has decided to be awkward at the moment I'm putting everything in, but it has. I suppose the more things you have going on, the harder it is to get everything lined up just so. We're getting there. It's just being awkward. A ratcheting screwdriver would be nice just about now. Oh well. There we go, that's got past the awkward bit. Ah, my arm. Swap them around. That's that in. The only other thing I have to do is just the flap at the top there. Because I haven't got the aluminium splash guard on here to help with spreading the load of the nuts and washers, I'm just going to use these slightly larger washers for these. Hopefully that will prevent the rubber from tearing. Oh, I've got to clumsy a clock with this job. I might use a little bit of adhesive on the top here just to hold this down. The way it's folded back, it's, I don't know, we'll see. It shouldn't really be throwing anything up here that gets in this part, so it's probably okay. I mean, none of this is waterproof, it's just water resistant. How long is this bolt? I like it when I order materials and it's just enough for the job. This is basically all I've got left over of that rubber sheet, and I have just enough to replicate these two pieces here, which go on the fuel tank sender unit access hatch in the boot floor. And the nice little thing about these is somebody has used an inner tube to replace them, which I find pretty adorable and is exactly what I would have done if I had an inner tube and didn't have the rubber sheet. Trace around them, punch the holes for the screws, and we shall get these installed. This is actually a good opportunity to show you how accessing the fuel sender is supposed to work on this car now everything's together. So you peel back your rubber mat and remove this little access panel. Now I could, of course, get myself into this gap underneath here and piddle about with screwdrivers in a space that's too small, or I could do it this way. Push that up from underneath, and then you have access straight down through this big hole to the panel underneath here. And it's lovely that everything's all nice and clean in here now. Every time I've been in here before, it's been horrible. So I'm appreciating the work I put in now. Right, once you have those out, and then take the two halves out, and do whatever it is you need to do. What it is that we need to do is take off these little clamps so I can put the rubber gasket on. And this is, again, it's not weatherproof, but it just prevents stuff splashing up into the boot and helps seal the fuel tank away. And I'm not sure which side is which at the moment. I think that's the larger one. Yes, that goes on that way. And because all of this rubber's new, it's going to be a little bit fiddly to get everything to line up. But happily I had the templates, so that takes a lot of the guesswork out. Wow, that's annoying. There we go. If you're wondering why this one has no screw, it didn't when I got the car. The hole drilled in this plate doesn't line up with this piece. I suspect this has been replaced at some point, a long time ago, and I'm not going to mess with it because it's fine, it works. Flathead screws. I still hate flathead screws, by the way. I don't like them any more than I did. It's so annoying. And that's that one completed. So this one goes in first because this one is notched to overlap it, and then the fuel filler neck will pop up between these two pieces of rubber here and push them out the way, and that will make the seal. It's not as perfect as a modern car, but it's how this car does it. And I imagine it was perfectly normal for the period. I mean, sometimes this car is the very epitome of good enough. There we are, all in. And that looks an awful lot tidier than it has in a very long time, so I'm very happy about that. The two rubber pieces do overlap slightly. They do overlap slightly, so they do create a reasonable seal. And of course the pipe will distort the central section here and runs up through that gap there to where we've put the rubber seal in for the mudguards. So we are getting there. Pop the hatch back on. When you're cutting bolts down, because these are all too long, I need to cut them all off, if you can, thread another nut on before you do. This means I don't have to undo everything, and it also means when I've cut it off I can unwind this nut and it will clean the end of the thread for me, so that I can actually get nuts on and off these things in the future if I need to. That's another job off the list. It wasn't a vital one, but it was a job that we did want to get done. And it makes sense to do this sort of work while you've got everything apart anyway. It slows down the project, but it means you don't have to come back and do it later. Yeah, I mean, it bit me. I dropped the wheel on my hand and managed to crush it between the wheel and the brake drums. Don't recommend that. That's not nice. So I'm going to have some black fingernails. Great. But it's yeah, it's good to see it done. A bit more rust out the car, and it's really good to actually use something off another Lanchester to repair it with. I don't know, there's something circular about using parts from another car of the same sort of age to keep this one going. I quite like that. After I chopped the ends off those bolts, I gave everything a splash of paint. It's not really necessary, that's going to come off in no time anyway, whatever you do. But it just keeps things tidy in the meantime. Does look a bit strange at the moment without the wings on, but they'll come soon. We'll get that done. And this side, of course, which also looks nice and tidy.